right. Well, we're going to go ahead and begin by sharing a little bit about ourselves and why we created this webinar. Jessica, do you want to go first and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Green. I am an integrative health practitioner and health coach, and I'm here in the Bainbridge Island area. And I've been working as a health coach for a few years. This is not my first career. My previous career was in sustainable building. I was a sustainable building expert, and just really got set on this health path, in part to heal myself and then to also help others heal themselves as well. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be here talking about how to calm the nervous system, which is such a key component to what I help my clients do.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to share a little bit vulnerably, and I'm going to share a little bit about myself and my family, just to share how trauma kind of affects creativity or your work. So, my name's Esther. I have been an artist, a full-time artist for 15 years and an educator for 10 years. And now I'm a coach. I'm also still an artist and a coach, and I help people to connect with their creativity. So when I was growing up, I grew up in a home that was very much, I was very much loved, but my dad had severe anxiety. So really kind of like reactivity and a lot of anger, right? So even though I knew I was loved and they shared their love, there was this sense of anxiety. And so I wanted to share that because when we are born, when we're babies, we don't have our entire nervous system online. And what we do is we take basically the nervous system of our parents and we adopt it as our own, right? So I had this chronic anxiety throughout my whole entire life. And also my mother, she was loving, but she was also very detached from her emotions. So we know that there's this bonding that happens between mothers, especially mothers, but caretakers, and this sort of eye gazing, this connection where you find your self confidence. So I grew up and became an artist and struggled a lot with this chronic anxiety of like, oh my gosh, like whenever I would get a client or a job, I would just get this like anxiety constantly in my chest, and also struggled with the confidence to move towards my own dreams, right? Mind, follow my intuition. So I just wanted to share that a little bit because just to give you some insight into um, even if our thoughts about trauma, even if you haven't experienced necessarily a huge trauma starting out as a baby, like you kind of absorb those things from your parents. So this is starting off pre-verbal, right? So we have these reactions in our body. So was there anything else you wanted to say, Jessica, before we kind of go into an exercise?
Yes, just in case you want to learn more about Esther or myself, and maybe you don't already follow us on Instagram. I'm Esther. Why don't we go ahead? We'll plunk in our Instagram handle. Feel free to check us out there, and you could also find more information through Instagram, like our website information or other things like that. Um, you're a little fancier than me. I'm just Jessica Green Wellness. I'll just put it in that way. And if you'd like us to follow you, we'd love to follow you too. Feel free to put your Instagram handle in the chat. And while you're doing that, yeah, I think we could go ahead and kind of dive right into this, because I think this is such a great topic. And, it's fun because Esther and I have chatted many times before. We've known each other for a little while now. And, I've interviewed her on my podcast, Detox for Vibrant Health. And we got to talking just maybe about a month or so ago. And we each had this realization that each of us in our own separate work, we we work a lot with high performing women who have some sort of trauma in their background, and sometimes it's pretty significant trauma. And it's not a huge surprise for me. A lot of the people that I work with have some sort of autoimmune condition or chronic illness. And uh, and so, yeah, I kept on seeing this trend. It's like, okay, trauma, there's a connection between trauma and illness, or dis-ease, or just inflammation in the body. And Esther, you've seen something similar, although with you've seen something else, sort of this other connection, and maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of ways that this manifests. And if you get my newsletter, I talked a little bit about how this can manifest in your creativity. But I had a couple of examples of women who they had experienced both cancer, both of them, and also deaths of parents. So both of them felt very stuck in their creativity. So they weren't able to kind of create so they had experienced this trauma in their life. The second kind I would say is women who um, they've experienced early, and we'll talk more about this in a bit, but early kind of childhood trauma, and how this kind of presents itself is not being able to hear your intuition, not being able to having imposter syndrome, not being able to follow your bliss, follow your creativity, listen to yourself, or have the confidence to move forward. Even though they were creating amazing things, they didn't even feel good about it or confident about it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny. In my work, the trend that I've seen is not necessarily deaths of parents, but it's been more of having a childhood that had some sort of form of abuse has been a common theme, and that could be, parents have been involved in drugs or alcohol, or maybe there was, emotional abuse and maybe physical abuse. I've seen that on the side of work that I do.
Yeah, so we thought it would be good to start with a little bit of a exercise. So when we're dealing with trauma and working through trauma, we want to do it very slowly, and it has to do with reconnecting with our body. So when we experience trauma, we get pulled out of our body. So a lot of people feel like they're disconnected from their body, they're just in their mind, they can't even feel the boundaries of their body, etc. So the very first thing we want to do is called orienting and becoming aware of our environment. So feel free to get comfortable, and so I and I also want to I want you to notice, like, when I start talking about doing an exercise in the body or somatic work, what kind of is there any resistance that comes up in you? Because it does for me. I've always been like, oh, body work, like that's just annoying, like that's just woo. So I have this sort of resistance. And this happens when you have trauma. You have a little bit of resistance to coming back and just being in your body. So just notice that. And then you can just get comfortable wherever you are. Feel free to turn off your camera for this little bit if you'd like. And I'm just going to kind of lead you through a little exercise. So just begin to sit with your eyes open. And Get comfortable in your seat and slowly draw your attention to something that's in your environment. Very slowly, just noticing the room that you're in. And bring your attention to an object in your room, in your environment. Maybe it's a book or a plant, or even your own hands. And just notice and just look at that object, that one object. And notice what is happening in your body as you're connecting with that object. Notice your belly rising and falling. And notice any kind of sensation in your body as you're looking at that object. And then just begin to look to the right or to the left at finding another object in the room. Not too fast, just moving your head slowly and just choosing one object and just taking in the color and the texture of that object. And then maybe slowly finding another object, noticing what kind of connection you have to that object. And then begin to bring your gaze forward, or you can close your eyes even, and notice how you're sitting on your chair. Notice the connection between your sits bones and your seat, how your back is maybe touching the back of your chair, how your feet are touching the ground, and how your hands are touching your body or the table. And just notice if you can sense with your hands a texture, some kind of texture. And again, noticing the rising and falling of your belly. And then I want you to take your hands and with your right hand, touch the palm of your left hand. Noticing the texture. And you can say to yourself, this is my hand. It's a part of me. And you can maybe touch your arm and say to yourself, this is my arm. It's a part of me. Noticing that boundary. And maybe your other arm. You give it a little squeeze. And maybe put your hand on your chest and say, this is my chest. And then finally, maybe just putting your hands on your face and saying, this is my face. It's a part of me. And then just slowly letting all that go and just noticing how you feel in your body, do you feel more connected? Do you feel more connected to yourself? And you can just write in the chat if you had any strong reactions, or maybe if you had some kind of um, resistance initially, how you feel now. Feel free to share in the chat if you want to. I had one client who really couldn't feel boundaries in their body, right? So we do this to come back and feel those boundaries and feel safe. Yeah, so that's really just the first step in coming back and doing trauma work, is orienting or coming back to our body and our environment, right? Yeah, hard to quiet the mind. That's great. Made you feel safe. Yeah, so that's what we want. We want to begin to make ourselves feel safe, right? And Jessica, do you want to share next?
Well, yeah, let's see. First off, I just want to invite everyone to turn on their videos again if they'd like.
Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable with, feel free to turn on your camera.
Wonderful. Okay, I think it's worthwhile next to share some of the different types of trauma that we're talking about, because trauma can be um, really serious, like severe in a way. And it can also be small, like small little traumas that we experience through life, especially through childhood. It could be something as small as um, that friend didn't want to play with me, to something much more serious, like, that kind of physical abuse that we might have been talking about, or a death of a loved one. And I think, Esther, you do a really great job at describing those types of trauma. And then when we go through that, then we'll jump into how does this sort of stress, the chronic stress and trauma, affect our body and mind.
Yeah, and I just want to give a definition of trauma. So Resma Menakem says trauma is a response to anything that is overwhelming, that happens too much, too fast, too soon, too long, coupled with a lack of protection or support. It lives in the body, stored as sensation, pain or tension, lack of sensation or numbness, right? So depending on how, like I talked in the beginning about my trauma that I experienced, I wasn't able to establish that nervous system. So depending on how you were able to establish that nervous system, events can affect you differently, right? So an accident could affect somebody with a weak nervous system differently than somebody who doesn't, right? So there's never any blame here. And we were talking about, this culture of productivity that we have, where, we've never before sort of, well, it's kind of gotten to an epic proportion of now how we are always on the go. We're always, needing to be productive, right? We're living in a society that really values producing. And so we have sort of become this nonstop machine, which is not how we were meant to, to act, right? We were kind of meant to do little spurts of intense energy or stress and then calm down, right? And Jessica, you can speak to that a lot too with the health things. So we have this constant kind of go 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 sense that we have in our culture.
Yeah, and in the natural, well, we are part of the natural world, but in animal kingdom, say for instance, Animals do a really good job at turning on that stress response to, say, flee a predator. And when the danger is gone, they're able to turn that back off and calm back down. But for us, we are in a constant state of that go, go, go. There's a deadline, there's a child to pick up, there's bills to pay, there's worrying about, oh, did I deliver well enough on that project? There's the laundry to be done. It's this never ending list. And it doesn't seem that there's ever really a downtime. And our culture really wants to see that productivity, right? And so we've been kind of trained that we should be on, and it's really getting hard to turn back off. So this becomes a form of chronic stress. This culture of productivity is creating this chronic stress state.
Yeah, so I just want to go over the different types of trauma because, as I said, like a lot of times we think of trauma as like a big, big T trauma, and I'm going to talk about this. So shock trauma is kind of normally what we think of trauma as, right? So wars, falls, accidents, surgeries, natural disasters, accidents, even birth issues, right? So we can develop trauma in the womb. We can develop trauma birth or having surgeries right after as a kid. And then there's early development and childhood trauma. So being left alone, like I said, not bonding, not having that bonding. This is really something we don't think about, but it is really important to the state of our nervous system. Abuse, right? Exposure to heat or cold. I have a friend who she was left near a window first part when she was a baby. So that is a trauma, because as a baby you can't do anything, right? So this gets stuck in your body, this sense of helplessness. So sudden loud noises, right? So if I heard my father screaming, punching walls, that would be trauma for a baby. So things like that as early development trauma. So, and then chronic low level stressors, like Jessica, you were talking about jobs we don't like, when we're constantly not listening to ourselves, to our bodies, and we are going, and if we forget what it feels like to be relaxed, even not being able to express or listen to your intuition on a constant basis, that is a constant low level stressor. Genetic trauma. So scientists now know that trauma is passed down through our DNA. So your grandparents, your great grandparents, if they experienced war, both my grandparents were in the war and the depression. So that trauma transfers down. As women, that trauma that we've experienced transfers. And then the last one that I want to mention is racial body trauma. So it's the mental and emotional injury caused by encounters with racial bias, discrimination, racism, and hate crimes. Minorities can have racial body trauma as well as people who are in white culture. So my grandparent was a racist. That genetic racial body trauma is in me. So acknowledging that, that it's been passed down to me, that is a huge deal too. So 95% of people have encountered some kind of trauma. So Jessica, you're going to talk about how it affects us physically.
Yes. Yeah. So, I'll kind of start off as a little story. I didn't share this in the beginning, but, one of the things that really affected me, and this happened, gosh, almost 10 years ago, I had lost almost all of my hair. And this trauma that triggered the event was the death of my mother. And that's just kind of that's a traumatic event. The trauma created stress in my body. My body created an autoimmune condition that caused me to lose all my hair, right? So the way that this works, and I'll explain it. Actually, I'm going to jump right into the vagus nerve here. So the vagus nerve, some of you might have heard something about a vagus nerve. Maybe you haven't, but you might have heard something called parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is your rest and digest state of being, which we really have trouble getting back into after some sort of stressful event or trauma. The sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight. This is what turns on. This is our vagus nerve, turns that on. It says, yes, you're in danger of being eaten, even if it's just you have to make a presentation. Your body doesn't really get the difference. And so it turns on the sympathetic nervous state. And so there are the vagus nerve connects to almost every single organ in our body. And it also connects to some muscular and skeletal systems, particularly in our throat. So you might notice, say, when you're really stressed out, your throat, you get hoarse, maybe. You sound tired, right? You sort of get this grumbly sound. And for people who have a more severe case of this issue, it might even cause some problems with swallowing. And so you have all these organs that are connected. And you might have heard something of the gut brain axis. Does that sound familiar to anyone? The gut brain axis? So what this is that we have information traveling along our vagus nerve from our gut to our brain. Most of it's from our body to our brain, and sometimes it's from our brain to our body. And so what happens when we're in a more parasympathetic nervous system state is that our we are able to digest better. Our stomach acid is what it needs to be in order to digest foods. Our heart rate starts to kind of slow down. We're feeling pretty good, right? When we're in the sympathetic nervous system state, however, our stomach acid starts to decrease. We start to get symptoms of IBS, maybe even we get some like sweating issues. Maybe we don't sweat very well after being in this sort of fight or flight. It's like you might think, oh, well, we sweat for a bit, but not if you're in this chronic sympathetic state. We'll have problems detoxing our body, and sweating is one of the ways that you do that. You can also get symptoms of just chronic inflammation symptoms, sort of these mystery symptoms that aren't bad enough to diagnose. You might get an autoimmune condition, which is diagnosed. You might even get cancer, as Esther was talking about. And so, but what's even worse is when you are in that sympathetic state for so long, you can actually retract and you get into the state of hopelessness and maybe like a freezing, like you just don't do anything. You're just like, your body is trying to preserve itself because you've been so stressed out for so long. Can anybody relate to that, where maybe you've been in a state, so stressed out that you just want to curl up? You don't want to do anything. You just say, forget it. Yeah, that is, that's a whole other state of the vagus nerve. And so there are some other things that can happen as well. Another marker of poor vagus nerve function or vagal tone is heart rate variability will go down. Does anyone have like an Aura ring like this, or some other like a Fitbit or a Whoop or anything like that that shows heart rate variability? Yeah, a couple. So when you see your heart rate variability is rather low, like say 10s and 20s, you definitely have poor vagal tone. If it's higher, then you're doing pretty well. And what that means is that you can shut off that sympathetic nervous state response and go into your rest and digest, right? It's a lot easier to toggle between the two, and that's what vagal tone really refers to. So just some of the other things that you might see from poor vagal tone resulting from chronic stress, and you could I think maybe you could relate to some of this. Some of the hair loss, maybe not what I had. I had an autoimmune condition. It went to that next level, but you might have heart disease issues. You might have depression. You might get fibromyalgia. You might get chronic fatigue would be very common because, one of the stress responses is that you pump out cortisol, right? So you kind of pump out cortisol, you can't sleep, you keep on pumping it out, your cortisol level is just too high throughout the day. Then over time, your body just can't do it anymore. So it stops pumping out the cortisol and then you kind of flatline a little bit. And that is a chronic fatigue syndrome. It's Addison's disease. So you could get all the way down to that state. You could still build up your body back to where it should be. I think your body is really meant to heal once you take out certain stressors. And in my line of work, I think sometimes this piece is sometimes overlooked, right? You might look at, oh, am I eating right? Am I exercising right? Am I, doing my deep breathing, whatever it is. But maybe it's just you're overlooking one main piece. Maybe it's that trauma. Maybe it's the childhood trauma. Maybe it's an unresolved trauma in your adulthood. But in order to really heal your body, you have to heal that trauma piece, that mind piece, as well as your body simultaneously so that you could really heal overall. So that is the mind and body connection piece.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to emphasize too, maybe a lot of you have gone to therapy their whole lives and like it still feels like you haven't, you've told the story over and over again. You've like been doing the work. Anybody feel like that? You could, yeah. So for me, I didn't really get the healing I needed until I found a therapist who was trained in trauma. Because, like I said, it's pre-verbal, right? And so what that means is it's basically an energy, a trapped energy that's stored in our body. And so we need to make the connection just not by talking, but by associating with our body back again. So, and then, yeah, and it's just so important that body connection that Jessica's talking about with the all of those things that she just talked about and she will talk about establishing that connection with your body, your food, your exercise and all those things. So I want to talk about, kind of two you might have heard of, fight or flight, fight, flight or freeze, right? Everybody heard of those? There's a lot of different F's, but I also want to add another one, which is fawn. So I'm going to go over those a little bit. So we can either get into, like Jessica was talking about, that parasympathetic or that sympathetic, right? So we can get into this hyper arousal, which, like I have, is like that chronic anxiety. My anxiety's gotten so much better, but it'll still come up like yesterday. It just comes up, right? And so that feels like, your heart rate's, up, sweating, racing mind. Does anybody struggle with not being able to find focus? Not being able to focus. Yeah. So being hyper vigilant, always wanting to kind of, be aware, looking at what's next. What do I do next? Right. And then we can have the kind of constriction, right? So the freeze state. And this is sort of a helplessness, right? A sense of being like collapsed. I see this in procrastination. So procrastination, anybody? Like, I think everybody struggles with that, right? So when I'm working with clients, yeah, there are a lot of things that we can do. And so, but there's a lot of things we can do like with teaching ourselves or helping ourselves in our schedule, but a lot of it comes down to a deeper level of that helplessness, that freezing. You could have brain fog or lethargy or resistance, right? So that feeling that comes up for me when I have a new project and I get this anxiety, and then I get this like constriction, and I don't want to work on it, I'm just going to give up, like when things get too hard, that is part of that, that kind of procrastination or resistance. um, and then fawning. So fawning is when you do not feel safe in your environment to express yourself. Like if you were a child and you couldn't express the fullest of yourself, like you couldn't cry or you couldn't yell or be free, be like, "Wah," like a kid, right? And I think this happens especially for people who are raised as women. um, we have this sense, it's basically kind of like a people pleasing. So you're abandoning your true self to kind of change your behavior for your caretakers, right? So whatever your situation is, you're kind of, you're not able to get a sense. As kids, we have this natural energy that comes up, this kind of natural healthy aggression. When kids are like, they're that age when they start like pulling hair and stuff. And what do we tell them? We said, no, stop that. That's bad, right? But what that is healthy, that is healthy aggression. So if we feel as a child that we cannot express ourselves, express our like healthy aggression, what do? We shrink down, right? And so we lose that sense. That healthy aggression is what I see as motivation. So when you're not feeling motivated, when you're not able to access that intuition, which is what I work a lot with clients on, how come I can't hear that intuition? Because you've always kind of done that fawning, like who do I need to be in this situation, right? Who am I supposed to please here? um, so it's a really interesting kind of thing that we don't actually talk about a lot of times. And so yeah, so I don't know, Jessica, do you want to get into what we can kind of do to start healing?
Yeah, absolutely. But I also wanted to just chime in. There's a parallel that I've seen there. One of the things that um, this is something that I've been thinking of lately in regard to the thyroid health. Oftentimes, there's some different thoughts around the thyroid, and oftentimes I hear this over and over again, where your thyroid starts to underperform or maybe even gets diseased in some way when you don't express yourself, when you hide it, when you keep it inside. It just comes out. It starts to build up, like right here where your thyroid is. So I think that's kind of an interesting um, connection to be able to make here. I think that there's a lot of interconnectedness in what we're talking about with functional medicine ideas around the body and getting out of balance with the body. So anyway, yes, I would love to talk about some of the things that you can do to help basically tone your vagus nerve. And this is really important. And there's going to be some, well, the first one I'm going to talk about is meditation. Now, and Esther's going to talk about this a little bit more. There's two thoughts here. One, if you can manage to meditate, like if you're okay meditating, then that's a great thing to do to help start to tone your vagus nerve. And I like using simple apps like Headspace. I like the visualization apps to help just kind of walk you through a meditation that doesn't have to go deep. It doesn't have to go deep into the trauma. And Esther's going to talk a little bit more about that. You can go very deep and then dive right into your trauma with meditation. But what I'm talking about here is just more of like just relaxing, right? Relaxing your body to try to get more into that parasympathetic rest and digest nervous state, right? The next one that really, really helps your vagal tone is vigorous exercise. And you might not think about this and very often, and I do want to caveat this, if you have adrenal fatigue, then you don't want to overdo vigorous exercise, right? You want to do enough vigorous exercise that you feel like you're building up a bit of a sweat, right? It doesn't have to be 2 hours at the gym. It doesn't have to be like an hour of HIIT. It doesn't have to be that much. It could be like a jog, right? It could be bouncing on your rebounder, little mini trampoline. That's really great for getting the vagus nerve functioning. This will help boost your HRV numbers for those of you who have an app. The other thing is looking at it from kind of the bottom up, so to speak. So rebalancing your gut is extremely helpful in this because there is that gut brain connection, and healing your gut helps with that connection. So, and I just want to make a point here too, is that in rebalancing your gut, you might be tempted to, do some Googling on your own, like, oh, how to rebalance the gut. But it's really important to test first for imbalances and really take the steps that you need to take in order to rebalance your gut. And that's what I help my clients with. So I just want to caveat, don't go out and start buying a bunch of, yogurt and, kimchi, because that might make things worse depending on who you are, depending on how your gut is. Also, with regard to food and diet, I would definitely say, within the rebalancing of your gut, be gentle with yourself. If something doesn't feel good, then don't do it. So, with that, I'll hand it over to Esther. She's going to talk about some additional tools and ways that you could start to heal this trauma.
Yeah, and I cannot recommend Jessica enough with everything she recommends to me, I buy pretty much because she does the research. She's so good at what she does. I want to say that, our bodies naturally want to heal, right? So they want to heal. We want to um, essentially start to heal these stuck survival energy that we have in our body, right? And so they are like body memories, but our body wants to heal physically and emotionally. And so I want to emphasize that we want to do this little by little. We want to titrate the healing, which is just taking very small steps. And so I want to talk about, and we want to bring in compassion and curiosity. So has anybody have trouble with meditation or breath work? You can put it, put it in the chat or just raise your hand. Anybody really have a lot of trouble? Yeah. So when we experience trauma, actually, we want to do this healing very yeah, tight. We want to do this very slowly. So a lot of times meditation can be too much, too fast. And so I would advise, if you feel uncomfortable or if you just are, having a hard time with meditation, I'm going to give you some ways that you can take it a little bit more slowly. And also even breath work. We just want to be careful because even the word breath can trigger anxiety in people with trauma. So if you having a hard time with meditation, you are not alone. So the two things that helped me, I'll kind of go into that. One of the things that helped me was actually meditation. But I had to sort of find my own way of doing that, which was very somatic. So The first thing that I would recommend is educate yourself. So I'll send out some links after when I send out this video, but educate yourself about what trauma is, how it affects the body. Find some people, read, and I have a link to some books that you could read about it and find exercises and tools. So the more tools that you have, you might say, okay, well, meditation doesn't work for me, but yoga works for me. Yoga is it's proven to actually work very well for PTSD. I have PTSD. So if you have PTSD, yoga has been proven to be very effective. Somatic exercises, things like that. The most important thing I would say is starting to bring awareness to your body, right? And this is a slow process, but the more we can bring awareness to, oh my gosh, I'm getting into fight or flight, I'm getting into anxiety, right? And start to build that sort of gap where we can make a choice, right? And we have those tools, so you could say, okay, I'm going to use this tool right now, and I'm going to try that, right? So bringing that awareness in, and it takes time doing that orienting, body scanning, feeling our feelings, following your impulses, even like noticing, do I have to go to the bathroom right now? Do I need a glass of water? Following those impulses is a way that we come back to our body and to what our body needs. And then the third thing I would say is working with a trauma-informed practitioner. So like I said, it wasn't until I found somebody who had experience with trauma who really could help me. And, I've had clients who've been in therapy for a long time, their whole life, and we're, working through it on a deeper level. So I actually um I work very intuitively, and those are the people that have helped me in my life, is people who have that intuitive sense of where we need to be. And so starting very small and then going deeper into like inner child. I do a lot of inner child work, reprogramming. So I'm very big into the neuroscience of this. So reprogramming your neuro network and your body sensations, right? So that you can be more productive, more creative, more intuitive. So connecting to that intuitive sense, you can't really connect to your intuition until you're connected to your body and you work through some of that trauma, right? It wasn't until I worked through that trauma that I was able to kind of be connected to my intuition. So if you're struggling with like procrastination or finding that authentic creative voice, or those kind of things being blocked, yeah, I can help you out with that. So I don't know, do we have time to do one more exercise
Oh my goodness.
real quick?
Yeah, I think we can. We could do one more exercise, and then I think we'd like to also open it up to questions. So, um, yeah,
Yes.
I
Yeah,
think
so
we.
let's do the exercise, and then then you can stick around if you have questions. And so I want to say there's kind of three things, kind of the process to work through trauma is like three steps, right? One is orienting and getting into the body. Two is releasing. And I talked about that healthy aggression. So releasing. So we're just going to do, and this will help us with our vagal tone. It might be kind of weird, but you will feel it helping you with that vagal tone. I have a lot of exercises to actually get into that healthy aggression, but this is a little bit more of just a releasing exercise. And then we'll just do like a quick integrating. So feel free to turn off your camera. Definitely make sure you're muted because we're going to be vocal. So just get comfortable. Get comfortable in your seat, just noticing where your seat is connected to your sits bones, where your back is connected to the back of your seat. Noticing where your hands are connected to your body or the table. And I don't want to pay too much attention to the breath, but you might see if you could breathe in through your nose. If not, that's totally fine. And then you can just watch me for the first one. I'm going to breathe in through my nose. And then I'm going to say VU as I'm breathing out. So okay, we can all do it together. Breathe in. And you can really just make it if it comes out a different way, like a different noise, that's totally fine. And one more. Okay, and just take your right hand, put it underneath on your rib cage, right below your arm, just on your rib cage. And then take your left arm and put it on the top of your right arm. And this is an integrating exercise. So just noticing how the belly is rising and falling. Noticing if you feel comfort. Bring compassion to yourself. And you can just slowly release your arms and open your eyes. And just notice if you feel any kind of release in your body. So Jessica, do we want to talk about, yes, ma'am. Good. Anybody else feel good? Do you want to talk about what you have to offer right now?
Yeah, and I do want to put in that I think if it's okay, we probably have a small enough group we could unmute people to answer questions in a bit. I do, so I work with people. I have clients one-on-one, and if you want to work with me, you could just book a discovery call. It's a free 30-minute chat. And I'll put the link in the bio here. And I do, as we're chatting a little bit here, I would love for each of you to put in just a takeaway, something that you really felt was an important takeaway from this for you, something that you really benefited from, or something that really struck you is, wow, yeah, that totally makes sense, and I need to do such and such for my next steps. I'd love to hear anything that you'd like to share in the comments, please. And with that, Esther, I know you have some fun one-on-one work as well, if you'd like to take a moment.
Yeah, I have coaching packages. I'm not offering those right now because I'm booked up, but I have 2-hour, I call them creative breakthrough sessions. So a lot of times we can kind of get to the core of blocks. I go real deep sometimes, depending on, where you're at. But I'm going to put that in the chat. And if you're feeling like you're unable to connect to your intuition, or you're feeling stuck creatively, and everyone's creative, right? You don't have to be an artist or creative. So wherever, if you're feeling like you're stuck in your work, or you're wanting to feel confident, or feel like you can express yourself fully, authentically, then you're dealing with procrastination or anything like that, definitely. And I have free monthly meetups too. So if you haven't been to one of those, I think I put my Instagram in there, so that I'll be posting those on my newsletter and on Instagram. So yeah. Um, let's see what trauma can be small. Yeah. So definitely that's a big kind of aha, right? Because a lot of us think that trauma has to be some big, big, big thing. And it also really depends on how sensitive you are, right? How you interpreted that as a child, or genetic trauma. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. It's hard to connect. Yep. A lot of people want, come to me to connect to their intuition or their authentic self, but we can't really do that if we aren't connected to our body, because that's how our intuition speaks to us, on a very basic level. Yeah. Healthy aggression. Yeah. I've been working more and more with that healthy aggression, in my meditations, my reprogramming work. Too much alone time as a kid. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thyroid thing. Get a marble in your throat. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. We really need, as a kid, to be seen, right? To be soothed. And there's one more S. Forgetting. Seen, soothed, and safe. Feel safe. So if you had a lot of time alone, yeah, you can interpret that, and not have that nervous system built up, right? Yeah. Is there any questions? So we can stay on for a few more minutes and answer any questions that y'all have. And feel free to unmute yourself and just ask them, because this is going to be recorded. So you could either, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you could put it in the chat.
Yes, we've got a question. Go ahead, Joanna.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for this. It was awesome. My question has to do with something I kind of dealt with just last week. Trying to be creative while under pressure, like for work, sort of like a deadline, but also kind of battling anxiety and kind of feeling buried under insecurity. So trying to be creative and being anxious, they're like completely like they don't work. And so I end up just sort of feeling paralyzed. So do you have any just kind of quick approaches like in that moment to kind of soothe yourself and kind of be like you're good, you're doing good, and like keep moving, instead of just like, because what I ended up doing is just like kind of freezing, and I had to just like walk away from the work, which maybe was the best thing, to kind of just like step away. But I was just wondering if you had any insight on kind of that push and pull of anxiety while also trying to create.
Yeah, that is really tough. I mean, having to create under pressure is a lot, is a lot. Yeah, I would say probably walking away is a really good thing. So we want to do the reset, right? So we want to have those tools. That's why I think it's so important. I don't know what kind of tools that you have for yourself. I am constantly trying different things, right? To see what kind of tools work for me, because everybody's really different. So it could be that walking away, taking a walk, and getting, you could even do this exercise that we just did. comforting yourself. I do a lot of inner child work. So I can go in and ask my inner child, or do, what you could just, kind of put your hand on your heart and say, like, I don't know if you've ever done any of that, but you could just ask them, like, what's going on, and just listen, and just really comfort and comfort yourself. And then somebody had another example of an exercise for healthy aggression. This is something, Joanna, that I'm working on, that could also be something to do the reset in between, right? So there's an example, one that I've been using, that somebody, the person that I have been doing trainings with, Irene Lyon, she uses this. So you take, I don't know if I have a towel, I have this. So you can do this with another person, or you can do it with yourself. And you can just take a towel. This is too big, I think, but you could do it with a person's arm. But you can just twist the towel and you go, and just release, right? So some people have taught in the past that you just pound a pillow. That's not good. Like, it's been shown that it's not healthy. It's not good. But this sort of releasing, there's also an exercise where you can push against somebody else. So releasing that healthy aggression. You can stand up and shake it out. I really like the vocal, like, it just really feels, so you can practice that at home tonight if you all want. Does that help, Joanna? Yeah, anything to kind of reset and get a bigger view. Somebody wants to donate. Jessica, do you have a Venmo they can donate to? Do you want to put that in?
Yeah, I can put that in.
Vagus nerve. Yeah, spelled Vegas, just like, oh wait, Vegas is Vegus, right?
Yeah.
US, yeah. Vagus nerve. I will be sending out, I'll be sending out some resources, solutions for procrastination. Yeah, I have so many ideas for procrastination. It's a complicated subject. Really, when you want to get down to it all, it comes down to comfort, right? And what did I, at the core, really core deep level, is why am I avoiding this thing? So we can do a lot of things with our mind for procrastination by, like, thinking about why we're procrastinating, like if the project's too big, right? Or if we're not really connected to it on a deep level, like if it doesn't feel right, like we could, that could be, keep us in procrastination. So we want to make the project smaller and take smaller steps. That's really helpful procrastination. But I work with a lot of people to get to the core of, why is it that I procrastinate? Like, for me, I do it. So a lot of times we're avoiding something. I procrastinate because I'm avoiding that feeling of anxiety that comes up, right? So and what is the belief there? So there's always a belief, usually a belief that's attached to it. And that is, I'm not good enough, right? So I want to avoid that, right? So I want to just procrastinate on that. So does that make sense, Kimberly?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so that's why, you could do all these steps for procrastination, but if you don't get to the core, then, it's a lot of times it's just kind of like spinning wheels or forcing yourself. So I really try to work with people to get, instead of external motivation, to get internally motivated. and unblocked.
Yeah, I think if I can comment on that, I think it usually comes down to that lack of awareness for me too. Like I'm procrastinating because I might be afraid of an emotion or I'm feeling an emotion, but I'm blocking out the emotion. So it becomes doubly complicated because
Yeah.
it's like I know I'm procrastinating, but it's almost like I don't know I'm procrastinating even.
Yeah. You're just overwhelmed with emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So once we can, even just that simple comforting, this exercise of comforting yourself, or speaking to the inner child, even just that, like just connecting to your younger self or your inner child and listening to them, it can soothe that emotion, or even just, feeling the emotion starts to dissipate, right? And then you can move forward or heal that other part. Yeah. Yeah. It's that freeze, right, Jessica? That freeze response of like overwhelm.
Yes. Yeah.
I have a question if there's still time.
Yeah.
Take this last question, and then what we could do is we're going to be sending out an email tomorrow. You'll see that from Esther, and it'll include some links in there, and you could also respond, do a reply, ask questions, and then we can follow up with you that way too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Natalie.
I mean, I'm experiencing it right now. Like I've been in plenty of situations where I'm like part of a group, either, in a professional world, me just joining a Zoom or something like that. And I am curious and I like have all of these like questions and these thoughts to add and like I have experiences to plug in, but like I'll be about to share and I get like so overwhelmed and my hands go numb and I'm sweating and then I'm like feeling detached, like the thoughts are slipping away because like my head is feeling like it's not part of my body anymore. And then it gets really overwhelming because I get frustrated with myself that like I can't connect when it's like time to do it. And I think that's held me back from a lot of like participating and being a part of things. So I don't know quite what to do with that in the moment, because in the moment it's like later I can soothe myself and be okay, but like in the moment it's like it feels like fight, flight, all of it.
Yeah. Did you have something you wanted to respond, Jessica, with that? I have one thing to say, but go ahead.
Yeah, when I thought of that, I kind of had a flashback of I had some challenges before where I would also just freeze on Zoom calls, not Zoom calls. Oh gosh, back then we didn't have Zoom, so it was some other video conferencing system. But yeah, just being able to speak up when I wanted to speak up, or connect my brain to my voice. Um, there was a bit of a disconnect there, and it can be, it might not be this at all, but one of the things that can happen if you have very low thyroid function, if you're a hypothyroid, it could cause that brain fog. And the brain fog can come out like not being able to jump into a call or meeting when you want to and say the things that you want to. Maybe it's just a slower connection, which it sounds like maybe you have, or maybe you don't have. Other symptoms of brain fog related to the thyroid, again, can be just having trouble remembering things. That's very, very common. So a couple of things there. And also just you start to, when you can't remember what you did the day before and you're having trouble communicating, you could start to feel disconnected pretty quickly.
Yep.
That's one thought.
Yeah, that's great. I would have never known that. That's great. I definitely have had a lot of social anxiety. And one thing I wanted to mention, but I forgot, was practicing these exercises when you are in a safe place, which not only I know that you do, when you are in a safe space. So we want to practice when we're not in that environment so that we begin to train our body to calm down, to center, to relax. One thing that I use, so there's a couple things that have helped me. One of them is visualization. So before going into the call, so this goes back to getting those tools, like which tools work for me. Is it this one? Is it this, inner child? Which one makes me feel grounded? So doing that and visualizing yourself. So our brain can't tell the difference between what we're visualizing, what we're telling it, and then what is actually happening, right? So visualizing yourself like 10 minutes before going into the Zoom meeting, and you're feeling grounded, you're speaking up, you're feeling accepted, you're feeling in your power, right? And just getting into that state before you get into the meeting. Another one is, this actually happened to me. I had this, so I work on like a subconscious level to reprogram these things. So I had this social anxiety whenever I got in a group with women. And every time I got into this group with women, I would have this anxiety. And afterwards, I would feel like, oh my gosh, I said too much. I did something. Somebody like responded to me, and like all of these things, right? And so I have all these exercises and these reprogrammings that I give to people, and then I help them through in my sessions. But you go through back to your younger self. And I know, Natalie, you've done this because you were in my program, going back and asking the subconscious or the younger self where this trigger started, where this belief started. And my subconscious showed me that I had moved as a child, like a lot. But one particular move, I sort of made this decision that like, I'm not accepted. I have no friends. Like, I am not, like, I'm just the outcast. Right. And so I went back and healed, reprogrammed this belief. And I kid you not, this is so wild, but I started getting more friends. Like all of my, like last year, like all of these women friends came into my life. I would get on these calls, and I still get like occasionally a little bit of twinge of it, but nothing like that anxiety. I mean, it sounds totally out there, y'all, but these beliefs and these beliefs are really like subconscious and unconscious, and so we can actually go back, and that was an example of something that happened like in that one session, which was so wild. But going back and doing that can really help too. Do those help?
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are over by 15 minutes. Thank you for
As
everyone.
usual for me. Sorry.
Yep, and Esther is going to be sending out an email, planning for that tomorrow, along with a link for the video replay in case you missed any of it, and for those who weren't able to make it today. And thank you so much for your time, ladies. It was so nice to get to know you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Bye. So nice to see you all.